Welcome to the podcast about Tatars in Poland. I am Maurits Berger, Professor of Islam in the West at Leiden University in the Netherlands.
And I am Ewa Górska, an Assistant Professor at the Digital Justice Center at the University of Wrocław in Poland. Together we'll explore the history, identity and traditions of the Tatars, the Muslim minority that has lived in Poland for around 600 years. Our quest will take us to remote parts of Poland, but also into libraries and into meetings with Tatars from all walks of life.
Our question is, who are the Tatars in Poland and how do they carve out their lives in Polish society? And is Islam here in Poland different from somewhere else? These are more than academic questions. They are also questions about the ways that Muslims are part of Europe.
This is episode 7, The Next Generation.
We are on our way back to Gdansk. We used the hours driving to discuss what we have heard and read and seen in these past weeks. And one thing that has become clear is that the Tatars we have met are affected by two recent events. The end of communism, 1989, and the attacks on the Twin Towers in New York in 2001. Communism has taken out the Islam from the Tatars and left them with their culture. After 1989, the Tatars tried to find and reclaim their Islam. But in doing so, they quickly faced two challenges. The first was a large group of immigrants from Muslim countries that brought with them an Islam that was quite different from how the Tatars had been practicing it for centuries. And the other challenge was the attacks of 2001 that would put Islam in a very bad light for years to come.
Well, Islamophobia is still very present here in Poland. You could sense that strongly in 2015 with the Syrian refugees who came into Europe. You can feel it now with new refugees coming. In the last few years, all that reflected very badly on the Tatars. Here, for example, listen to an article from 2015 published in a well-read newspaper Rzeczpospolita with the title, "Where should Tatars be deported to?" So, the author writes, "If I'm to be fair, I personally feel no civilization connection with the Polish Tatars. If they have not converted, have not renounced Islam, having lived among Christians from the late 14th century until the beginning of the 20th century, then perhaps there is something to worry about. Of course, I'm not saying that we should set the alarm bells ringing, set up the Polish Pegida and write down proscription lists. But there is no harm in being careful. I do hope that Tatar Muslims are being well looked after by the relevant Polish authorities. They are, after all, an entirely different civilization."
Wow, how xenophobic can you be? Especially when it's about a tiny minority like the Tatars. Now I do understand why the Tatars try to counter this image by presenting themselves as good Muslims, as Polish patriots who had fought and died for their homeland.
Yes, exactly. And it makes you wonder also how they see their future. I remember that Janeta from the Tatar restaurant in Kruszyniany had spoken about this, and so had Michał Łyszczarz, the sociologist from Olsztyn University. So let me just check their recordings when we make our next stop.
We are in some road cafe, and in a quiet corner, Eva fumbles with the equipment and finds the two recordings. The first is from Michał.
Widzę taką lukę pokoleniową, to znaczy się
I see a difference between generations. The older generation has lived in communist times and they are strongly attached to traditions. They're also very much focused on issues of power in the community. But the younger generation, they do not want to get involved in all these conflicts. And like all other young people in Poland, They are very secularized. But unlike the other young Poles, the Tatar youth are still more attached to religion. That is because for Tatars, religion has a family dimension, a communal dimension. If they go to a mosque, it is not only for spiritual matters. This is a place where they can meet people like them. This has been so through the centuries. Firstly, because it prevented complete assimilation into their surroundings. Secondly, it tightened the community ties.
To jest to miejsce, ten czas, kiedy możemy się spotkać z osobami bliskimi.
And here is the part when I asked him whether he thinks that the Tatars are an ethnic or religious group. He says some very interesting things about this.
Tatarzy są społecznością etniczną. To wynika po prostu z ich tożsamości.
The Tatars are an ethnic community. They are an ethnic group simply because of their identity, because there is this cultural continuity of many generations.
Zwłaszcza lata 70., 80. były takie momenty.
Of course, there were times in the past, especially in the 1970s and 1980s, when the Tatars, living in communist Poland, defined themselves as a religious minority because this was, in a sense, a result of a pressure that the state put on the Tatars.
Chować tą odmienność etniczną, a uwypuklać.
Tatars hid their ethnicity because there was the idea of a mono-national state. So while the ethnic Tatar organization was not allowed to operate, the religious organization was not bothered by the authorities. But still, there was a strong weakening of Muslim religiosity. There were different reasons for that. Not only the general secularization of the population, but also the enormous loss of Tatar lives and heritage during the Second World War, and the uprooting of Tatar communities after the war when they were displaced across Poland. And so the Tatars presented themselves not as Tatars, but as Poles who professed Islam.
Osobami tatarskiego pochodzenia, ale Polakami właśnie wyznającymi islam.
Yeah, so that's a bit strange, isn't it? You'd expect the communists to allow for ethnic identity and clamp down on the religion. But according to Michał, it was the other way around. But then listen to what Janetta had to say about it.
This old wooden mosque here in Kruszyniany is a very important mosque for our entire Tatar Muslim community. And it's even more important for the Tatars who live somewhere in Poland where there are no mosques. For them, this is like a Mecca. It is very important. It is like community. This place is something inside us. It's very important for us, for our psyche. You know, when I was young, I didn't know how to pray. Polish Tatars have never prayed 5 times a day. Never. Halal meat they ate when they slaughtered in the name of God, but specifically to buy halal, there was no such thing. They didn't eat pork, but they also didn't eat halal. I knew nothing about my religion, but I made sure, together with my husband, that my 3 daughters were raised in Islam. Because I was terribly worried about what we would leave to our children. And I thought, we have to preserve the identity for them. And so we settled here in Kruszyniany. Kruszyniany is, you feel it, it is our soul, our ancestral soul. And then, from the 1980s onwards, our Tatar youth came here and we made bonfires and so on. There were a lot of marriages from this period. And in that period, youth organizations were formed, and this is a very good way of identity preservation. And we, the parents, started to give our kids the old Tatar names again, because our parents stopped doing that because they didn't want us to have problems at school or at work or wherever. I am extremely happy about all this. Because people saw in Poland that there are Tatars, that we have our own cuisine, our culture, that we are Muslims. And you know, today, there are many young people who pray.
Dużo młodych jest też takich, którzy chodzą rzeczywiście, modlą się. Coraz bardziej te nasze społeczeństwo.
But what bothers me are these quarrels of the elders in the Tatar community. It's bad for the youth. Because these elders, and especially the mufti, should be encouraging the young to study and to even go abroad to do so. But I haven't heard of any youth going at the moment. And in the past, when we were living in the time of communism, even in those times, the youth were going abroad to study Islam.
And listen to this. This is the part about the attacks of 9/11.
Więc najpierw to była nasza ojczyzna przybrana.
So first, Poland was our adopted homeland, and then it was fought for. Our blood was shed, and every Tatar will say he is a Pole. But then these attacks in America happened in 2001, and I always say God is one, because they always divided. Your God, our God, and I talk to those people. I don't tell them too much about religion. I don't know enough myself. But I speak from the bottom of my heart, and I say, what kind of terrorist am I? Touch me. I am a Muslim. Are you afraid of me? Our ancestors have been neighbors for over 600 years together, and nothing bad has ever happened. And then we had these past 20 years. It's just 20 years. But it seems like such a long time. My father, when he was alive, would say, I am a Tatar, then a Pole and a Muslim. I say, I'm Polish, I'm Tatar. For me, it balances out. And I am a Muslim. My children will say they are Poles. For them, Tatar is just a word. It is something far away.
Tatarami gdzieś tam daleko, bo to tylko słowo.
We order some food and eat in silence. We both need to process what we heard. And after a strong coffee, we get back in the car and continue our way to Gdansk. Okay, we're driving. There's a long road ahead of us. Eva's at the wheel, so she's a bit preoccupied, and that might actually be the right moment to ask a question that has been on my mind ever since we started this. Eva, you told me, kind of offhandedly in the beginning, that you have some kind of Tatar ancestry. Would you like to tell me about this?
Yeah, sure. I even think we were avoiding that a bit during our trip. So there was kind of a gossip or legend, I don't know how to even call it, in my family. It was mentioned that we have some Tatar ancestors, but someone would mention it and then the conversation would go another way, and my family is not very big on really talking about our roots and bloodlines, so I don't know so much. But then before we met, we started thinking about doing this project about Tatars, and then I thought I would ask a bit more. So it seems my great-grandfather, he was Tatar, but then it was completely lost in the family, the knowledge about why. Well, we are Christians, so we are Catholic. So someone converted along the way or secularized. So when I also tried to understand how much possibly I'm Tatar, I just did some maths, and it's 1/16. So it's really not a lot of that in my blood, as far as I know, because I also don't know who the grandfather married and all of that. So I do have most probably some Tatar blood, but it's not a lot.
Does it matter to you?
Well, I think at first it was just this funny, curious thing about me or my family. And now when we're doing this podcast and we're talking so much about who the Tatars are and between and also off the record, we had all those long discussions about identity. And it matters, or I understand now that it matters a bit more than I thought. But I also think this is a bit on the emotional level. I think I understand why they are, or some of the Tatars, are so focused on preserving the identity, the culture, the religion. Because I think I miss that somehow. Like, I miss knowing my roots or my blood. There's, I think, part of me that's a bit nostalgic about belonging. And I think belonging to a minority that, has such close ties, maybe it would fill some void. I think I'm this child of a globalized world that feels a bit disconnected, and I envy them the connection and the knowledge and the roots.
But, so you're saying, I understand this search for roots, but if that search would end or would find you in a Tatar community, you would find it even more satisfying in a way than if you were some kind of Polish Catholic nobility?
Well, there's this funny thing that I was always asked why I chose to specialize in Islam and Middle East, why I studied that and why I'm passionate about it. So it is more symbolic, but if you do think about me possibly having some roots somewhere along the way, it does maybe not explain, or maybe explain that to a certain extent, or it's just... There is something that it would make it more important for me, I think, to know that I am Tatar and I have like some kind of Muslim ancestry than it would be if I would be in, I don't know, another minority.
But okay, well then, and now we're going to have the $1,000 question. Is what I understand from all the conversations we have had, being a Tatar purely by ethnicity is not yet a Tatar. In comes the Islam. How would you think about that? I mean, would that be... is conversion something that would come to mind?
Yeah, $1 million question. So I'm not generally religious, and this is why I wouldn't convert. But if I were to convert, Islam is fine for me. I know it might be a very controversial thing to say in Poland right now, but I like Islam. But then Tatar Islam is different, and I don't think it's about being Muslim. I think it's about being Tatar Muslim, with Tatar Muslim traditions and understanding. And I think this would be something that is very hard to learn, and I think it's very hard to become part of that community. So I might... feel nostalgic or miss that, but I don't think it would be even possible to become, because then again, it is also ethnicity. I do understand it also as having Tatar blood to a, I guess, larger extent than 1/16. So I think there's that as well.
Okay, again, assuming you're part of this Tatar community, would you celebrate that Tatar identity? I mean, would you go those festivities and all the things that people like Janetta are organizing? Would you participate in that more than before, or is just the knowledge of belonging to that identity enough?
I think knowledge would be more important. Maybe looking for roots in a way that in which I would know from where my family came from, or if I have some relatives somewhere, and just understanding who my ancestors were. I don't want this to sound wrong or for anyone to feel offended, but a lot for me of what is happening around Tatar culture and celebrating Tatar culture is a bit of folklore. So then that doesn't feel or ring identity to me. It's curious, it's exotic, but it's not that. So I think it's more about genealogy and, you know, having that tree and just knowing where you come from and having that knowledge. I think it's all mixed, like what you are and what you choose, and that you have multiple identities at the same time. But again, what I envy the Tatars is, you know, having a deep history, roots, knowledge about that, about their religion. And I understand, like, there's some hesitancy because now there's more contact with the outsider. Not only now, let's say past 40 years with, like, for example, Arab Islam, they might feel like they maybe don't belong completely to the Muslim world, or there's something different in that Islam. But I think this is exactly the core of the identity. It's like that there are very strong traditions, cultural traditions that, you know, there's everything is in there, the religious component, the ethnic component, and it's something like, even if you don't root yourself or your identity in your bloodline, you can root yourself in belonging in those traditions.
Let me be controversial here, because one could also say, especially after everything that we've heard and seen, is that this whole identity that we are talking about is more something of the mind than it is something of the blood. It's more something that people make up, and they're resuscitating something. It's almost an imagined identity that they are embracing and that they really want. How authentic is all of this? Or does it not matter whether it is authentic or not? You just make it happen in your heads, and then you're going to live accordingly.
Well, I think it's both. So what I said before about folklore, that part of it feels like folklore for me, and that feels artificial, and that feels imagined, and for me, because I understand not for everyone and not for every generation it might be the same. But I guess this is what we also heard about the youth and bringing up next generations, is that, well, the youth might have a different feeling about what they want to root themselves into. But also, you know, we all need some identity. And I guess there are just different ways to get there and find that. That was an unexpected talk that we just had in the car. It sheds some new light on what we mean by Tatars being Polish and Poland being an adopted homeland. And I think this is something for me to think about a bit more later. But for now, we have to concentrate on our last meeting, and that is with Olgierd Hasbijewicz, the custodian of the mosque in Gdańsk. I had told him that we wanted to meet him again and thank him and to talk some more. And he just answered that he is at home, but that he has time for a meeting online only. So as soon as we arrive at the hotel in Gdańsk, we call him.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I just click here.
What is the best way, Ewa? You also ask in Polish, or that I ask some questions in English?
No, I think you can do it in English. Like, I'm sure Olgierd understands, and if something is not clear, then I translate. I think it's...
Ewa, you will translate it later on. I will speak in Polish. Po 1945 roku Tatarzy nie mieli własnego miejsca, gdzie mogli się spotykać w celach
Let me start with our mosque. The Tatars in Gdansk did not have their own place where they could meet for prayer. So in 1984, the communist authorities gave permission to build a mosque, which was completed in 1989. The style was that of a typical mosque in the Middle East.
Meczet o konstrukcji bliskowschodniej, powiedzmy konstrukcji takiej, można powiedzieć, bałkańskiej.
And the first chairman was a woman, my grandmother, Jamila Smajkiewicz-Murman. And later, the imam of the mosque was my father, Selim Hasbijewicz. Well, and I am the chairman until today.
No i jestem przewodniczącym czy też prezesem gminy do dzisiaj.
May I, perhaps a personal question, but I understand that you're from a family that is very much involved with Islam in Poland and with this particular mosque. Is there something more you could tell about
W zasadzie tak, panie profesorze, będę mówił po polsku. Yes, Mr. Professor, I will speak in Polish. W zasadzie tak. No, mój ojciec
My father raised me and shaped me into the man I am now. He was undoubtedly a Tatar scholar, above all a cultivator of the memory of the Tatars and of Islam. He was the only Tatar poet of the post-war period. His poems are still published today. He taught me to pray, he taught me the Quran, he taught me a kind of attachment to the Tatar tradition. Thanks to this, I have formed my identity. But I am aware that I may be the last Tatar in this position.
Który, powiedzmy, może został ostatnim Tatarem na posterunku.
So I see it as my duty to make sure that the memory remains of the Tatars and of Islam in Poland. How the Tatars preserved Islam for centuries in Poland. I do not know if there will be someone of Tatar origin after me who will do this, because the Tatars are an aging society, and I think there are fewer and fewer people who have this same sense of duty.
And Mr. Professor, I think it's my duty, to cultivate and to make properly this function, because I do it because I feel it that I have to, I must. I nie wiem, czy po mnie nawet młodzi Tatarzy, którzy żyją.
Even the young Tatars who live in Poland today, in Gdansk, are not completely involved in life, in such a social life. There are very few of them, and I don't know if there will be someone after me, or I hope so, but I am not able to predict it.
Domysły, domniemania i taka trzeźwa ocena sytuacji skłania mnie ku temu, żeby powiedzieć, że ciężko będzie znalezienie czegoś takiego.
Olgierd looks a bit somber on the laptop screen, and I want to direct the conversation into a different direction. So I ask him what he thinks about Islam as a religion in Poland today.
The Muslims of today walk the same path. They're brought up similarly. I do not see much change from the generation before that lived in communism, when people in general were ashamed of their identity and their belonging. The Tatars who come to my mosque are not the young ones, but the old ones. They're in the 60s and 70s, and the Tatars are just getting fewer and fewer. And what then? When Mufti Miszkiewicz is gone, when I'm gone, who will be in charge of the whole community here? Well, I can't answer this question. I'm not going to speculate.
Nie będę spekulował.
So I also asked Olgierd about this Tatar cultural renaissance in Podlachia. Is it helpful?
To bardzo pomaga, tylko że to niestety oddziałuje lokalnie, a nie ogólnopolsko. I will answer in Polish. Nie ma takich osób, które moglibyśmy wysłać.
The Tatar Renaissance in Podlachia, around the mosques of Bohoniki and Kruszyniany. Yes, I do think this helps, but only in the region over there, not here, not nationwide. The main problem is the imams, the scholars. No one wants to go abroad to study, and the few Tatar imams we have now, they're not scholars.
And the people who come here, they are not scientists. There are simple people, sometimes who became imams. They became the imam because there is nobody else. Like, for example, in Turkey, there is a school, Diyanet. There is a old machine who prepared these guys, these people, to make this function. It's not in Poland. Imams in Poland, they need to work, for example, in a different way, because they have to protect their families, and the function of imam, they don't give them the money. They don't give them the salary. Yes. For example, me, I'm a manager of the mosque, but I need to, for example, have my own company because I don't get the money from the mosque like it was my salary and give my children some protection. You know? It's impossible. Yeah. And sometimes it's too many things, too many jobs for one guy. For example, tomorrow I need to go to work, and between my work I need to go to prepare some guy who died 2 days ago because I need to prepare him to last journey. It's you can imagine, Mr. Professor, how it's difficult to manage these two things.
Olgierd is called away by his wife. Dinner is ready. We sit in silence after this story. What a contrast with the optimistic tone of Janetta. But we have little time to talk about this. I need to catch my flight back. Eva and I say a quick goodbye and then I rush off. We will call each other in a few days.
This podcast was hosted by Maurits Berger and Ewa Górska. Sound editing by Tomasz Stankiewicz, tostanki.pl. Voiceover Natalia Orkisz-Plebanek and Zbigniew Lecznar. Music in this podcast series is by Ansambl Peregrinus, which recreated traditional Tatar music, and by the Arab artists Sabry Mosbah, Tamer Nafar, Ghalia and Yusuf Kehia.